one of my favorite quotes is the German finance minister in 2018 at the G20 meeting in China said, the debt growth model is over. There are no reforms that aren't real reforms,
Hmm.
which means we can't borrow our way out of this. We have to cut, we have to change. And I think that's where we are. And so as I look at the 50 states, we're talking not just about the change of significant loss of revenues or sort of hits to expenses in 2020. But if you look at the extent to which small business has been wiped out and incomes have been destroyed, if you look at 21, 22, 23. So I just saw a chart that said 49% of the small businesses in San Francisco are expected to be closed or shut down or bankrupted in 2020. Now, how does a municipality adjust when its accruals for pension funds and health care cannot get cut very much?
Well, I'm afraid that's part of the incentive and the motivation for many state and local governments, not all of them, to rely on Uncle Sam, which in
Right.
turn can we trust, can a lot of people think the federal government's authority to borrow and print money is a resource, and we're not at the day yet when they stop showing up to buy treasuries. But as they, the
Well, we just saw an announcement that the deficit this year is now up to 3.1 trillion. I don't know if you saw that
yes,
headline.
yes, I did.
Yeah, yeah,
And possibly the real one is even bigger when you consider the unfunded Social Security and Medicare. That's
right,
another story. But one of the lines about bankruptcy is, how did you go bankrupt? Slowly and then suddenly. And
right.
I'm afraid at the federal government level, I don't want to be a scared rabbit, but I'm afraid we should be careful of abusing that possibility.
Right. Well, we face the issue of what does bankruptcy look like at both the federal and state level. In one sense, the federal government can't go bankrupt because it can always print. If I could print money off my computer in Catherine dollars, I can always pay my creditors because I just have to print money to pay them. But what that means is, the dollars I print are not, at some point, if you go up that S curve, are very
That's
worthless.
a form of bankruptcy. It's a form of
Right.
default. It's a one of the I teach money and banking at Loyola, and I love to bring the students to the story of
Hmm.
this old Jesuit monk, Juan de Mariana from the 1500s. This fellow wrote a rant against inflation at the time, using the way in which the king would debauch the currency by taking the gold content and silver content out. He wrote this rant against inflation, and that's what got him in the. He also wrote an argument when it's ethically justified to kill the king, and his rant against inflation is the one that got him in more trouble than the argument for killing the king.
Well, let's face it, Jesus got thrown out of Jesus got crucified because he threw the central bankers out of the temple, right? So I used to always
We're
tell
laughing, but
everybody
this is
that,
serious stuff, Catherine.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
that
real.
Jesus on the cross in the front of the church is basically a subliminal message to the kids saying, if you mess with our money, here's what we're going to do to you. But let's talk about what bankruptcy looks like at the state level. First of all, there's a serious question as to whether banks will be allowed to go. I'm sorry, whether
States.
states will be allowed to go bankrupt. And and so if they run out of money, what we're talking about is preserving tax revenues for the bondholders and slashing services to the bone or raising taxes or both or literally confiscating property.
Well, the states then, they also have an incentive first. The first things, push will come to shove first, and trying to get money from the federal government in
Right.
order to forestall this process. And then, when we get to that push versus comes to shove, we're going to see, and we are seeing today, you see the migration trends pretty significantly directly correlated. as you were talking about, as citizens, we should be looking at our governments. Well, the governments that are in bad shape are seeing exit. The lab rats are escaping from, and that's going to be a source of pressure and competitive pressure.
So I wanted to ask you about that because you of course are in Illinois, and John Titus always joins me on Money and Markets, or he's been joining me for the last couple months, and he just left and went to Indiana. He moved out of Chicago, which he loves. He loves Chicago. So, and of course we have many subscribers who report leaving California and San Francisco. So, to what extent are people migrating out of these states?
They're doing it either because of the prospect of higher taxes and what they see as government services. This is not just a higher income phenomenon. Lower income people that depend on government services have seen pressures on those services, and the property taxes for people in Chicago and the west side, the south side, and relative to the value of their property has made living in Chicago a less attractive proposition.
Right, and
And
property values have gotten hit pretty hard, haven't they?
they have, especially
Right.
in the south side and the west side in Chicago. And it's the migration trends are real, and that's going to be, that'll help the day of reckoning come sooner than later.
So I'm going to tell everybody listening to this call, if you are thinking of moving to a location in the United States, this is a must read report. Not just for you. If you know somebody, if you have a family member, a relative, a friend, a colleague who's moving, they have to do due diligence on their state and their local jurisdiction, because we are coming into a world where jurisdiction matters a lot. And I think that's why, for anybody who's moving in the United States, this report is an incredible blessing because it dramatically lowers the time it takes to do due diligence on a state.